And welcome to today's hearing on the economic impact of federal investments in Massachusetts. This is a hearing of the United States Senate Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Subcommittee on Economic Policy. I chair this subcommittee, which oversees issues of economic growth in this country. Given this subcommittee's focus, it is no surprise that we're here today to talk about one of the key drivers of economic growth, public investment. One of the most important things I do every day as a senator is make sure that the federal government officials are aware of the Commonwealth's needs and that our communities, our residents, and our small businesses get the federal support that they need. To get that done, I work with my partner, Ed Markey, who tirelessly advocates for Massachusetts in the Senate, and with our hardworking House partners, including Congresswoman Lori Trahan from right here in Lowell. Now, in Washington, we've also worked with everyone, both Republicans and Democrats, to deliver for our Commonwealth. In just the last 2.5 years, we've worked with President Biden on historic legislation to bring nearly $8 billion in federal funding for projects to expand our infrastructure, public safety, research, and transportation projects right here in Massachusetts. With President Biden and the leadership of Democrats in Congress, our nation has made truly historic investments. The American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. 4 bills, 2 passed with Republican support and 2 passed entirely by Democrats. 4 bills that have delivered money to fund hundreds of projects and thousands of jobs right here in Massachusetts. This work has made a difference that can be seen all around the state. We've supported firefighters with over $270 million in federal funding. We've secured $185 million in federal funding to help connect every home, school, and business in Massachusetts with affordable broadband. We fought for funding to repair and replace aging infrastructure and bridges that pose safety risks to drivers, pedestrians, and businesses, including right here in Lowell, the Broadway Street, Market Street, Lawrence Street, and Swamp Locks pedestrian bridges, and roads and bridges all across the Commonwealth. As we discussed earlier today, we have secured commitments for hundreds of millions of dollars to begin replacement of the Bourne and Sagamore bridges on Cape Cod. We have invested in public transit, including federal funding for the Green Line extension, our ongoing work to make sure the T is safe and reliable, and $275 million in federal support for transit capital and operating expenses, funding for transit systems in Barnstable, Springfield, Worcester, and other cities and rural communities throughout the state. We're supporting clean energy and a clean environment. We fought for and won $1.5 billion in the bipartisan infrastructure law for the EPA's Brownfields program. And now 14 communities here in the Commonwealth, including Worcester, Berkshire, Springfield, Ware, and Westford, have received federal grants to clean up polluted, abandoned, and neglected properties and redevelop them into meaningful community assets. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill created the Clean School Bus Program. Last year, 5 Massachusetts school districts, Fall River, Lawrence, Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative, New Bedford, and Upper Cape Cod Regional Vocational Technical, received nearly $30 million through the program to buy dozens of clean, new electric school buses, and there's more money on the way. We have fought for billions of dollars in new funding for research and innovation, including nearly doubling the funding for the National Science Foundation. Together, the National Science Foundation and National Institutes of Health have supported thousands of jobs here in Massachusetts and thousands of scientists at all of our great research institutions, including nearly $12 million in funding right here at UMass Lowell. Last year, we learned that the Department of Energy was providing two Massachusetts companies, 6K Inc. and Ascend Elements, more than $530 million for innovative battery manufacturing, recycling, and materials processing. All of this federal support means that Massachusetts will continue to be a leader in research and innovation, building a cleaner future for our children and grandchildren, and creating thousands of good-paying jobs here at home. And there's more. This year, with the Massachusetts congressional delegation, we secured legislative earmarks worth nearly $225 million to support 160 community projects across Massachusetts. I just have to name a few. Funding for home base and Massachusetts General Hospital so that we can support the families of fallen veterans. Funding for child care services for homeless families in Boston. Funding for the North Shore Workforce and Career Mobility Program in Salem. Funding for capabilities to support adults with significant disabilities, and dozens more projects like these. Governor Healey and her administration have been strong partners, helping to identify needs and doing everything they can to identify, plan, prepare for, and implement infrastructure and other projects that receive federal funding. I am extraordinarily glad that she's going to be able to join us later today. The Biden administration has worked to pass historic bipartisan legislation, and then officials have been working just as hard as anyone to set up and implement these programs. I appreciate Dr. Kathleen Hogan from the Department of Energy and Carlos Monje from the Department of Transportation joining us today to talk about their work. And finally, we've heard from and listened to and worked with leaders in the local communities to make sure their needs are met. I appreciate Dr. Burke, the co-executive director of the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, Dr. Chen, the chancellor right here at UMass Lowell, and Mr. Lou Antonellis from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, who took the time today to give us their firsthand account of how this federal support makes a difference for families, for small businesses, for schools, and for communities all across the Commonwealth. So thank you all for being with us today. Senator Markey, you are recognized for an opening statement.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, for bringing this very important hearing to Lowell, and thank you for your leadership in fighting, in leading, persistently, and insistently, in battle after battle to make sure this funding actually has become a reality for Lowell and for the Commonwealth. So thank you. And again, it's just a tribute to you that you bring this hearing right to Lowell, right to the people. And you've already gone through the litany of all the money, and so I won't repeat it. I'll just kind of summarize it. Between the two COVID relief bills and the infrastructure bill and the CHIPS bill and the IRA, which is the biggest climate bill in history, Massachusetts is going to receive $135 billion. How much is that? The entire state budget is $56 billion. So more than twice the entire state budget is coming in federal money in this really once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to look at that investment and to say, how can we capitalize upon all of the different opportunities, which is why we're so glad that all of you have come here today, because you are the experts. You're there on the ground. You know what's happening in terms of ensuring that we get a disproportionate share of all the federal money, and that it comes here to the Commonwealth because we're smarter, we're more aggressive, and we're ready to make the applications in a timely fashion so that we are able to bring that funding back. So This is, for me, just such a great gathering of leaders. I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. As we go down the line here, I'm obviously going to be very interested in all the clean energy money, all of that funding. I know a lot's going to be going to UMass Lowell, grants that they're already applying for and winning. But I know that the same thing is true all across the Commonwealth. This is a revolution in infrastructure investment, and we thank all of you for everything that you're doing. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Markey. So today, we're going to have 3 panels, and I'm going to introduce the 2 witnesses at our first panel. I'm very pleased to introduce Mr. Carlos Monje, the Undersecretary of Transportation for Policy in the Office of the Secretary of Transportation. In this role, Mr. Monje helps to oversee Build America Bureau and the implementation of the once-in-a-generation investment of the bipartisan infrastructure law. So thank you for joining us. I also want to introduce Dr. Kathleen Hogan. Dr. Hogan is a distinguished national leader in clean energy with a more than 20-year career as a federal executive spanning the Environmental Protection Agency and now the Department of Energy, where she serves as the Principal Deputy Undersecretary for Infrastructure. Thank you for being with us, Dr. Hogan. I will turn to you, Mr. Monje, for your opening statement. You are now recognized.
Thank you very much, Chair Warren and Senator Markey. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today and for your leadership and partnership in Washington and here in Massachusetts as we work to build a stronger, safer transportation system. As I speak to you today, the Department of Transportation is close to wrapping up its 2nd year of implementing the historic bipartisan infrastructure law. We've been hard at work creating new programs and making critical investments in our nation's infrastructure. To date, across the administration, we have announced more than 38,000 projects across the country. We actually have a map of the country with dots on it, and
Is it cool?
there's no white space. There's no white space. Our transportation investments are making our roads safer for pedestrians, for bicyclists, for drivers, and making transit more affordable and reliable and accessible, and reconnecting communities that have been divided by past transportation decisions. We're making sure that these new investments are not only resilient against extreme weather, but help combat the climate crisis. And these are not only investments in America's infrastructure, but as you said, Chairman, also in its workforce, creating hundreds of thousands of good-paying jobs each year in manufacturing, construction, operations, and maintenance. On behalf of Secretary Buttigieg, I'm honored to share with you today some of the ways in which the people of Massachusetts are benefiting from these investments, as well as other areas of the department's work. Safety is the department's top priority, and in 2022, we committed to an ultimate goal of achieving 0 roadway deaths through our National Roadway Safety Strategy. I'm pleased to begin by highlighting our safety investments in Massachusetts. After all, Massachusetts consistently ranks as one of the safest states in the nation in terms of fatalities per miles traveled and in pedestrian fatalities per capita. The bipartisan infrastructure law greatly expanded the resources we're able to put towards roadway safety in the form of the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. To date, we've awarded more than $30 million to 17 communities here in Massachusetts. The Safe Streets and Roads for All program is helping 15 communities across the Commonwealth, including the cities of Fitchburg, Pittsfield, Southbridge, Ware, and Worcester, to develop comprehensive roadway safety action plans. We've awarded $9 million to Boston to deploy low-cost, high-value safety improvements at intersections across that city. In Springfield, we awarded $15 million to improve safety for pedestrians and cyclists at 15 intersections and along 10 corridors that currently experience disproportionately high number of fatal crashes. The Safe Streets program is just one example of how we can continue to work together to make one of the safest states in the nation even safer. DOT is also hard at work tackling the climate crisis. As the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, transportation must also be part of the solution. On this front, we've made significant investments in Massachusetts. Most notably, our Federal Transit Administration awarded nearly $220 million in the last 2 years under the bill-funded Low and No Emission Bus and Bus Facilities program. Through these awards, we're helping to replace diesel buses with electric and hybrid buses across the Commonwealth. In the last fiscal year, Massachusetts received more than 10% of the total funding for this program. I don't know if that's disproportionate, but it was second only to California in terms of the total funding received. These are the kinds of investments not only making transit agencies more reliable, but also giving transit riders a quieter, more pleasant experience and communities cleaner air. Moreover, they include efforts to prepare our transportation workforce for these newer technologies, including through apprenticeships, on-the-job training, and instructional training. A good example is the $6.9 million award provided here in Lowell to the Lowell Regional Transit Authority in June to purchase hybrid electric buses to replace their older vehicles that had reached their useful life, and to launch a workforce development program that provides on-the-job and instructional training for the maintenance and operations of these hybrid electric vehicles. As we make investments in the safety and climate impact of our transportation system, we're mindful that the benefits of transportation projects must also be done equitably. The department is actively addressing environmental justice and working to undo past harms through the Reconnecting Communities and Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity programs. Those are two separate programs. As part of the Biden administration's Justice 40 initiative, here in Massachusetts, the new Reconnecting Communities program is already helping the city of Boston assess the feasibility of reconnecting parts of Chinatown to downtown Boston that were previously divided by the construction of the Mass Pike. Meanwhile, RAISE, the other program I mentioned, is funding improvements to transit infrastructure, bridges and roads in disadvantaged communities in Springfield and Lynn, in New Bedford and Brockton, and again right here in Lowell. And we're funding the rehabilitation and preservation of 4 deficient bridges here in town with improvements to pedestrian, bicycle, and transit accommodations. Lastly, I want to touch on America's workforce and innovation as we look forward to building for the future. Massachusetts received nearly $6.5 million from DOT's new bill-funded Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation. It's a SMART discretionary grant program. In Massachusetts, SMART is funding smart traffic signals in Brockton, planning for smart grids at the Cape Cod Gateway Airport and at Metro West's Regional Transit Headquarters, and improvements to rail safety on Cape Cod using unmanned aircraft systems and smart sensors. I was here in Boston alongside Governor Healey earlier this month to cut the ribbon on a brand new facility at DOT's Volpe Center, right in Cambridge, which will draw on some of the brightest minds to support the work across our department. This new LEED certified facility will provide the modern facilities needed to expand advanced transportation research and house the next generation of the transportation workforce through internships, academic research partnerships, and mentoring programs. Speaking of academic partnerships, we also recently named UMass Amherst as the lead of our New England University Transportation Center, along consortium members from Bunker Hill Community College, Holyoke Community College, and MIT. We're excited to see how they can help us advance our transportation work, particularly in both safety and equity. In closing, at DOT, we see Massachusetts as a shining example when it comes to demonstrating how transportation infrastructure can be safer, more climate-friendly, and a tool for building communities and encouraging innovation. But we're also encouraged by the Commonwealth's desire to go further, to continue investing here in the years to come, and improve the lives of its residents and workers, to support the critical industries that reside here, and to present a model for communities across the nation. Thank you. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Munhay. Dr. Hogan.
Chair Warren and Senator Markey, also thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on the Department of Energy's progress in implementing the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act, which we call Bill and IRA. So Bill and IRA truly are historic investments in renewing American infrastructure for decades to come, really for rebuilding American manufacturing and increasing American competitiveness, important to bolstering our energy security, reducing energy costs for American families, and as we've said, creating millions of lasting, good-paying jobs, and of course, to do it right here in Massachusetts. So on behalf of the department, I truly thank you for your leadership in getting these bills over the finish line and our ongoing partnership in their implementation. So through Bill and IRA, Congress, you all, have committed to invest more than $90 billion over the coming decade through the Department of Energy and really to catalyze investment in our energy infrastructure. To date, the department has opened the funding for at least $72.8 billion of that funding across the public and private sectors, and as we know is so important, with a special mission to ensure tribal, underserved, and traditional energy communities have a seat at the table. So now we see investments are heading to many partners and energy priorities across the country, including the Commonwealth here. Just this week, the department announced nearly $100 million for 2 projects in Massachusetts under the Grid Resilience and Innovation Partnerships, or GRIP program, as we call it. These awards propose to help reduce the impacts of extreme weather events and natural disasters on the region's grid, as well as to modernize the electric power system. In addition, the state and tribal formula grants for grid resilience in bill brought more than $9 million to Massachusetts, which the state will in turn use to competitively fund projects to improve energy reliability and resilience while addressing energy costs for consumers as well. Bill and IRA, as we are implementing it, are also providing substantial investments for our aged homes and buildings. Congress provided a tremendous $3.5 billion into the Weatherization Assistance Program, which reduces energy costs for low-income households by increasing the efficiency of these homes. Of that total, more than $80 million is in Massachusetts, is allocated to Massachusetts, with 50% of those funds already in the state. And in addition, in June, the department announced the first selectees for the Renew America Schools program, which will fund upgrades at K through 12 public schools in areas of need. One recipient is Natick Public Schools here in Massachusetts, who will receive more than $2 million to fully electrify the Bennett Hemingway Elementary School, being able to add a new heat pump and state-of-the-art automation so that they can replace aging rooftop units. The department has also provided funding to 2 Massachusetts cities, towns, Boston and Littleton, totaling about $1 million, and that's through the bill-funded Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant Program. These efforts in these areas will be, in these 2 regions, will be used to improve building efficiency and to increase electric load flexibility, and there'll be many more local awards coming as we address the applications from communities on a rolling basis. The department is also working closely with the states as they work to roll out the more recent funding under the Inflation Reduction Act's home energy rebate programs. Here, the Commonwealth will receive more than $146 million to help households, many of them low or moderate income households, to save money on their bills, upgrade their homes, and reduce indoor and outdoor air pollution. When we look at this program nationally, these rebates offer up to $1 billion in home energy bill savings each year, and will support more than 50,000 jobs across the country. And of course, there's even more jobs and savings available when they get paired up with the IRA home improvement tax credits. Bill is also bringing nearly $8 million to Massachusetts through the longstanding state energy program, which assists states in meeting their energy objectives, and we look forward to seeing the work there. So really, in closing, as the department continues our bill and IRA work, and as you can hear, we're still in the early phases as what is a many-year effort here. We really do look forward to our partnership with this committee as we strive for a clean and secure energy future that is made in America and that creates millions of American jobs, including right here in Massachusetts. So on behalf of the department, again, appreciate your interest, the opportunity to be here, and look forward to your questions.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I, again, appreciate both of you being here and appreciate all the money you're bringing. So we're talking about billions of dollars of investments here, and there are dozens of ways that these investments are going to help families and small businesses and communities all around the Commonwealth. But I just want to start with transportation. Mr. Monhay, you help oversee transportation policy for the Department of Transportation for our whole country. You've worked at a lot of different jobs in federal government for more than 2 decades, and I just thought you'd be perfectly situated to explain a little bit about the scale of what's going on here. When you think about your career in public service, how significant is the federal investment in transportation projects that is occurring now under the Biden administration?
It's historic. So you mentioned once in a generation. It might be once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
And it's certainly, for many of us at the Department of Transportation, something we've and they've for much longer worked their entire careers to do. We've got more money for roads and bridges since the creation of the Eisenhower system, more money for transit in the history of the Republic, more money for rail since the creation of Amtrak. And to think of where we started at the beginning of this administration and the depths of the pandemic, Congress wisely put a lot of resources that we put into place to save the aviation industry, to save the transit agencies all across the country. As a result, 14 million jobs have been created during this administration, and 336,000 just in the last month. And we've got more jobs for women, for people of color, for people with disabilities in decades.
Or good union jobs?
Union jobs it is a golden age for unions, and also the lowest inflation of any major economy in the country, in the world.
So I tell you what, we'll come
Yeah.
back to
Yes,
some of
ma'am.
these. And I just want to make sure we get this laid out, because we also did some research on this. This is the largest federal investment in public transit ever. It is the largest federal investment in passenger rail since the creation of Amtrak. It is the single largest dedicated investment in bridges since the construction of the interstate highway system. So, all powerfully important. Can I ask you, I just want to drill down on one of these, and that's bridge funding, which has been particularly important right here in Lowell. Mr. Monhay, how much federal funding is Massachusetts set to receive through the bipartisan infrastructure law for bridge replacement and repairs?
Yes, ma'am. Just in terms of federal highway formula dollars, it's $5.4 billion.
Wow.
$5.4 billion over 5 years, and that's $243.5 million for each of the fiscal years for just the bridge formula funding. And as you know, Massachusetts, before the bill was passed, there were 472 bridges and more than 1,100 miles of highway that were in poor conditions. And that's just the formula dollars. I have a list in this packet somewhere of just a sentence on each project that is one discretionary grant. It's 14 pages
Wow.
worth of projects, and I have to have a shorthand if you ask on any of them because there are just so many. Massachusetts is competing and winning for these dollars and doing extremely well. And that's combined with money that's coming from the Commonwealth as well, the Next Generation Bridges program.
That is terrific. And it is also good to see that we are pouring money in to make sure that our public transit system is greener. To date, the bipartisan infrastructure law has awarded Massachusetts about $135 million for clean transit buses and improved bus service through a Department of Transportation program aimed at helping state and local governments purchase either zero-emission or low-emission buses and the facilities needed to support these buses. Mr. Monhay, could I just ask you, is investing in low-emission or zero-emission buses something that if we didn't do this at the federal level, then the state and local governments typically would be able to pick it up on their own and make that transition from old dirty diesel buses to these clean new buses?
No, ma'am. I think the federal investments are critical, and as you know, that we've provided a record investment, $1 billion a year. That's 6 times what we were funding before, and these vehicles are critical. We've already awarded grants to build more than 1,800 American-made zero-emission buses, and Massachusetts again is competing and winning, including a recent grant here that's going to purchase 7 zero-emission buses. It is critical and a key piece of decarbonizing this sector.
Yeah. I want to add, I really appreciate that the Department of Transportation not only is helping us replace the buses, it is also helping build the facilities, so you've got charging stations and can actually keep them up and running.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're reducing the cost for our towns on this. I also want to ask about what it means to be unlocking scientific advances that will fuel the next generation of energy technology. I feel like in this area, Massachusetts has no equal. We have researchers at UMass Lowell and MIT and Northeastern who are already using federal funding to develop new semiconductor materials, to test and monitor drinking water for communities across the Commonwealth, and to create academic networks to increase engineering degrees among underrepresented groups. You know, government-supported research has long been a critical ingredient in generating innovation that supercharges our economy. And that's why one of my top goals from the day I was elected to the Senate has been to double the funding for the National Science Foundation, which is our government's premier research program for scientific research. And it's also why I introduced legislation called the National Institutes of Clean Energy Act to invest $400 billion in a system of institutes at the Department of Energy dedicated to research and development of advanced clean energy technology. Now, the CHIPS and Science Act, which Congress passed last year, set up a program very similar to the one I had proposed. When fully funded, it will send billions of dollars to the Department of Energy to invest in basic scientific research related to clean energy technologies. Dr. Hogan, we often talk in fields like biology or chemistry how basic research can unlock advances, for example, in treating cancer. How does the work that our research universities and our national laboratories do on basic science of energy help us in the long run to fight climate change?
Well, just a great question as we sit here and talk about sort of putting technology to work today. What we're not talking about is why these technologies are here today, and it's because of the work we did in basic science many years ago, right? So think about the materials discovery side of things as one example, and you're already talking about what's going into semiconductors. So basic science is really just critical to us keeping a pace with the solutions of the future. And, you know, we talk about the revolution we are going through right now with electric vehicles. And, you know, but we have more work to do there. I mean, they're great now, but they can keep being better, right? So we can have better materials, lower cost, more variety, et cetera. And it does go back to the work we need to do with basic science. One of the efforts we're very excited about at the Department of Energy that we've launched is our 8 energy Earthshots. So what's behind those Earthshots? It's really putting together really difficult goals for the future around some of the hardest issues in addressing the climate problem, and a way to put our arms around the discovery you need to do in basic science and pull it together with our applied science programs at the department. Because again, these are all part of what we need to do to make as quick progress we can on these very important problems.
That is terrific. And I just want to dig a little deeper actually on one piece of that. And that is how federal funding helps us grow our economy. And I'm thinking right now about batteries and the work that's being done around batteries. The Department of Energy has created, out of the bipartisan infrastructure law, an energy innovation hub focused on spurring innovations about batteries. Now, batteries are going to be critical to our clean energy goals, particularly when it comes to transition to electric vehicles. Dr. Hogan, can you just say a word about why federal funding for something as basic as batteries is so important to accelerate the growth of the electric vehicle market?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for that, because, you know, again, we are living through this, and there's so many things we need to get right as we do this. We want people, you know, we want there to be a lot of accessibility to the batteries. So when you bring federal funding to the table, more people can have access to high-quality batteries. You know, this is kind of a global thing that's going on right now, and for us to play in this country and have as many people play as possible, it takes the money to make that happen, so that we're not left behind. So there's the accessibility issue that is critical, but the other very important opportunity we have in front of us is the manufacturing of all of these batteries, and both for transportation and for our grid as well. You know, with the help of the investments from the bipartisan infrastructure law, we will be increasing the supply of the whole battery supply chain in this country, in many corners of the country.
So that was my third question. So it's basic research, it's batteries, but could you say a little bit more about how the work you're doing is also about supply chains?
Yes.
And why this is so critical to a clean future?
Yeah, so I've talked a little bit about how, you know, this is a global change. As we know, there's lots of countries that then have the opportunity to pick up the new investments and then sort of own that part of the supply chain. This is our opportunity in this country to cement and secure our energy supply chains, you know, around batteries and other clean energy opportunities as well. We talk about onshoring, reshoring, or just making sure it's made here as we grow out some of these new opportunities. So that's really the critical aspect of this, and we don't have to say the word geopolitical issues too much, I think, to really underscore why it's so important to get this right now.
That's really terrific. Thank you, Dr. Hogan. Thank you both. Really appreciate your being here. Senator Markey?
Oh, great, thank you. Mr. Secretary, I heard you mention earlier, California's #1, Massachusetts is #2. What category was that?
I'm sorry,
What category was that?
of the funding?
Everything.
For the low-no bus program,
I just
yes.
wanted,
Yeah, it's
I'm
number
not sure
2.
everyone heard it, yeah.
It's the number 2 state behind California, and Massachusetts is a lot of people, but not quite as many as California, so you're doing extremely well.
In terms of what?
In terms of discretionary grants for low-no bus grants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, California's #1, we're #2 in NIH funding. California's #1, we're #2 in National Science Foundation.
Yes, sir.
And we're not just the Bay State, we're the brain state as well. And so we're 6 times smaller than California, but in actual dollars, you know, we compete.
You're doing very well.
And,
Yes, sir.
And then that goes into our economy, and it makes all the difference in the world. And what I'd like to do, if I could, is to just turn to the issue of passenger rail, intercity passenger rail, you know, because it works, you know, to increase productivity, but it can also reduce greenhouse gases from going up into the atmosphere as well. So could you talk a little bit about the East-West Rail $108 million grant? Because I think it would help to explain what we're trying to do to make sure that we are expanding upon the vision the administration has.
Yes, sir, and we're very excited about this project. The Federal Rail Administration is about $66 billion that it's spending on rail, and again, a big chunk of it's coming to Massachusetts. And as you mentioned, $108 million through our Chrissy Grant program. And basically, you've got a rail line that's run by CSX, a freight rail that runs east to west, and we gave $108 million to upgrade, in many cases to provide double tracking, to re-engineer the geometry of the rail, and to make sure that there's a pull aside so that we can deconflict those rails and add twice a day service east-west and provide an alternative to NEC. It is one of the great projects that we were able to fund in the first couple of
Please
years.
make sure you get those rails correct, because we're going to have a green line problem.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Period of time, please just make sure that happens. And Doctor, I'd love to talk to you about the Renew America's program that you talked about for Natick High School. Obviously, we need a Green New Deal for public schools in America, so that they can move to the future and that kids can be in healthy environments. So can you talk a little bit about that program? I understand that upwards of $5.5 billion worth of applications went in for that program across the country, just showing the needs that exist in public schools for these kind of clean energy programs.
Yeah, absolutely. As you point out, Congress provided the department with $500 million for this program. It's a brand-new program, so you didn't really know what type of interest, demand there would be for it. We put out a first-year solicitation at the level of $80 million, but the applications that we got for that were over $5 billion. So we were able then to take 2 years of the appropriations that Congress had gave us for that first round of awards, really trying to provide the money to improve as many schools as possible relative to what we had then, and we will have more solicitations in the future. But you're absolutely right. It was 10 times oversubscribed with good applications to help schools. The other aspect of this is it's all schools in needy areas. The kids have to, in these schools, have a high percentage of being on lunch voucher programs. So these are aged schools, schools with kids in need, and it's really an opportunity to improve not just the energy efficiency, but the learning environment and address the indoor air quality as well.
Exactly. There's leftover asbestos problems and lead problems from earlier generations that are still there, and befouling the air, the environment in which children are trying to learn. And we're just going to follow up for a second on what Senator Warren was talking about in this battery technology area. We are a special place. In Greentown, we have 300 startup companies in Greentown in Somerville, and all of them qualify for the tax break for the most part, that was in the IRA. Joe Manchin called it that. We call it the biggest climate bill in the history of the world, okay? So that's what it was. And the appetite for this funding is enormous. It's not $369 billion. It's more like $1,369 billion. And I saw a picture of Joe Manchin standing next to Secretary Granholm in West Virginia, cutting the ribbon on a new battery plant down in West Virginia, saying that 800 jobs are going to be there. And there should be a comma in that sentence saying, and that battery technology comes from Somerville, Massachusetts, in Greentown, and Form Energy, which invented that technology, developed that technology, and has, hundreds of workers, here as well. And we'll be spreading that technology across the country and not using lithium ion, but using iron, I-R-O-N, the second most common element in the world. So the breakthroughs at UMass Lowell, the breakthroughs in Greentown, the great breakthroughs all across this state, it's absolutely, it's electrified this state to electrify the country, okay? And we thank all of the work that the two of you are doing in order to make that transition telescoped in time because of the urgency of the problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Munhay. Thank you, Dr. Huggard. We appreciate your being here. And now we call up Governor Healey. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So I am pleased to introduce the Honorable Maura Healey, the 73rd Governor of Massachusetts. Since assuming office in January, Governor Healey and her administration have been a force. Just yesterday, she issued an executive order that officially establishes the Federal Funds and Infrastructure Office to help ensure that Massachusetts is equipped to make the most of this funding in every city and every town across the Commonwealth. Ed and I could not ask for a better partner in the State House, and we are grateful to the governor for taking the time to join us today. I will now turn this over to Governor Healey for her opening statement. Governor Healey, you are recognized.
Well, good afternoon, Senator Warren, Senator Markey. It's a pleasure to be with you here in the historic and vibrant city of Lowell. I couldn't think of a better place for this convening, and I welcome the opportunity to testify about the critical importance of federal funding to our state's goals and our future. Massachusetts is a state of firsts, as we know, the first state constitution, public school, library, and park. We built the first lighthouse, railroad, and subway, and here in Lowell, one of the great centers of industry, so much was accomplished. Now, also, I know that you had an opportunity to spend time with our Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll earlier today and other members of our administration. Know that our entire team sees our responsibility as an obligation to lead today in leading in ways to protect the rights and well-being of our people and to fearlessly tackle the biggest challenges our nation and our world are facing. Since taking office in January, we've led the fight on climate change. We appointed the nation's first cabinet-level climate chief and the state's first undersecretary for environmental justice and equity. We launched the nation's first state climate bank dedicated to affordable housing. We extended our clean energy lead and issued the largest RFP for offshore wind in New England's history. We banned state purchases of single-use plastics and launched the strongest biodiversity conservation program in the nation. We've also led on the fight to lower costs for families, seniors, and businesses. Last month, we signed into law the most generous universal child and dependent tax credit in America. And this week, we filed the Affordable Homes Act, which would be the biggest investment in housing affordability in our state's history. We've led on education. Our first budget funded permanent free school meals, breakfast and lunch for all public school students, and free community college for those 25 years and older. We've rallied to advance equitable access to higher education in the wake of a misguided Supreme Court decision on college admissions. We've defended reproductive rights and the safety of our LGBTQ youth. We are leading, but the challenges we face are generational in consequence and global in scale. That's why your leadership in Congress, in partnership with the Biden-Harris administration, has been so inspiring and critical to our efforts. You have enacted some of the most ambitious investments in America's history, stamping this legislation with Massachusetts values, from Senator Warren's fight to lower prescription drug costs to Senator Markey's pioneering climate bank vision. The intent of these investments and the requirements for states to secure them are closely aligned with our visions, our policies, our work here in Massachusetts. And our partnership with the federal government has the potential to make the deepest impact and set the highest standards for our country's progress. Federal infrastructure funding will not only help Massachusetts make long overdue repairs to our roads, rails, and bridges, it will allow us to create good, accessible jobs and to strengthen community and coastal resilience. That's why our applications for Cape Cod Bridge funding and the Alston Multimodal Project include commitments to advance the legislation's goals of high labor standards and pathways to good middle-class careers for women and men of color. Federal clean energy funding through the Inflation Reduction Act will not only help us achieve net zero carbon by 2050, it will help us create green jobs, affordable housing, and environmental justice for our communities. We are planning on using all of our resources inside and outside of government to match funding opportunities with our decarbonization goals. That includes the Community Climate Bank, which will finance the decarbonization of our building sector while expanding affordable housing for our people. Yesterday, we announced our application for $250 million in clean energy, solar for all investments. These would be for up to 78,500 affordable homes from the EPA's Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the largest emission reduction initiative in U.S. history. In addition, federal funding for advanced manufacturing through the CHIPS Act and so much more will allow Massachusetts to not only lengthen our lead, but to broaden access to good innovation economy jobs. We're working with industry to expand workforce development pathways, starting with historic investments in STEM education in our schools, which we celebrated here, STEM Week in Massachusetts this week. Already, we won the Department of Defense competition under the CHIPS Act to host the Northeast Microelectronics Hub, with plans for workforce training in advanced manufacturing. And we've been named an Investor Catalyst Hub for ARPA-H, the National Institute of Health's Medical Innovation Program for transforming healthcare, in part because of our proven commitment to health equity. From the first days of our administration, competing for and winning federal funding has been one of our highest priorities. We established a Federal Funds Infrastructure Office under Director Quentin Palfrey to guide this work across our administration. and to work to rally partners in local government, business, academia, and labor. We are getting results, and we have the opportunity, we believe, to do so much more. What federal funding means for Massachusetts is an economy that brings opportunity to all of our residents and solutions to our nation's and our world's most pressing challenges. I thank you once again for the opportunity to testify and be here today. And I thank you for all of your tremendous advocacy on behalf of the residents of Massachusetts.
Well, thank you. It's terrific to have you here today. Your administration has hit the ground running, and we are proud to be your partners in making sure that the federal government in Washington is providing the resources needed to support both infrastructure and economic development right here in the Commonwealth. Now, we've been talking all day about the historic scale of federal investments that have been made during President Biden's first 2 years in office. Everything from bridges to scientific research to public transit. But as unprecedented as these investments are, there's still a limited number of federal dollars available. That means there is fierce competition all across the country to bring these dollars home. In many cases, states and localities must demonstrate that they are willing to put their own funds up, to bring their funds to the table, to combine with federal dollars in order to receive a federal grant. So, Governor Healey, can you just say a little about how did you approach the task of making sure that Massachusetts would have the matching funds that it would need to be competitive to win federal grants?
I appreciate the question and could not agree more as to your characterization of the fierceness of the competition
Yes.
among our sister states and also cities, chasing hard after these federal dollars. And again, unprecedented funding available through the actions of the Biden-Harris administration and through the work of you all in Congress. So, it was our estimate that there's about $17.5 billion available in federal funding. The combined applications require as much as $3 billion in state matching funds to be eligible, to maximize how much we might be able to be awarded. So $3 billion in the state obligation altogether. We've already got $2 billion. We worked hard to put $2 billion and make that available for this purpose. And just yesterday, we took another big step forward. And what we did is file legislation specifically to create what we're calling a capital investment and debt reduction fund. This will allow us to leverage the interest that has accrued in what is a historically high stabilization fund and use that money to support pay-go funding. It's capital in hand. We estimate that over the next 3 years, it will be able to unlock approximately $800 million in resources that can be applied to pursue federal funding opportunities. Importantly, it will also include $50 million for municipal matching grants and a local infrastructure bank. And this is a resource that our cities and towns can use to finance infrastructure projects and support federal grant applications. So that's one thing that I wanted you to know about in terms of our ability to compete. It's making sure that we show the state has skin in the game, that we're doing our part in making not just words, but action and money available to pursue and leverage, maximize opportunities for federal funding. Also, it was very important to create the director position, create the Office of Federal Funds and Infrastructure. It is a whole of government approach that we are using to make sure that that office is working with every single secretariat and agency, both to help identify federal funding opportunities, to help our teams make and put forward the very best application for those funding opportunities, and to track things. We also formed an advisory council because we know how important it is for teams to be meeting regularly. This is a bi-weekly interagency coordination effort. so that we're holding one another accountable throughout the administration. They also maintain a state clearinghouse for tracking federal grant opportunities and agency applications. And we recently established as well a federal funds partnership for municipalities and tribes. We thought this was very important because we need to make sure that our cities and towns, our tribes, our regional planning authorities have the support that they need. First off, that they know what's available, because as we know, not every city or town or tribe has the bandwidth to be able to spend the time to identify federal funding opportunities, say nothing of the infrastructure to actually do the work in completing applications. So we wanted to make sure that we were helping them both identify and then make those applications. Those are just some of the things that we've done that I think have put us in a position to really rally Team Massachusetts. And I think you're not afraid of sports analogies. I know both of you.
We're fine with those.
That team spirit is really something we're trying to promote. I think it's one of the reasons we were able to win ARPA-H, because we really rallied through this Team Massachusetts approach, bringing together the business, academic, nonprofit, labor communities to show who we are, show what we're capable of in Massachusetts.
You know, I just want to say, you've only been here 9 months. And that really is extraordinary, because we're talking about the unprecedented amount of money that's available, but this money is not available just because someone puts it in a nice big box, puts a ribbon on top, and hands it over. People have to get out and compete for it. And you and your team have just done an extraordinary job of lining up Massachusetts and Massachusetts schools, Massachusetts towns, Massachusetts institutions, Massachusetts companies to take maximum advantage of every federal dollar that you can get your hands on. And all I can say is Ed and I are there all the way with you on this. I'm just going to ask you one more question and then hand it over to Senator Markey. And that is, we've talked about a lot of the projects. We've talked a lot about the bridges. We've talked some about transit, both mass transit, school buses, and so on. Where else are federal resources needed to help grow the economy in the Commonwealth?
Well,
We always want to ask for more.
No, and I always will. All of the areas that you mentioned are very important. I would add to that coastal resilience. I mean,
Yep.
with the severity of the storms that we've seen and the impact on existing and antiquated infrastructure, we really need help in that area as well. I mentioned our greenhouse gas reduction fund for a reason. This is a generational opportunity here, and now states are eligible to compete for the Solar for All program to really accelerate solar deployment. My team identified places in Massachusetts where there's more capacity for solar. So we have the capacity, but the question is, how do we actually get this built? And so we need assistance in the federal resources to make that happen. Our climate bank is identifying nearly 30,000 affordable rental homes that are eligible to be retrofitted with EPA funding over the next 5 years. And this is really important in terms of investment. Some of our infrastructure needs statewide. Williamsburg, I look at the Williamsburg Route 9 reconstruction, and it's important. We applied for $44 million to help with rural surface transportation. This would modernize and reconstruct Route 9. It's a critical east-west freight route in the region that is very important, that has safety and resilience needs. We also applied for another infrastructure improvement project that travels along a part of Route 7 that goes over the Compusa Brook in Stockbridge. And this requests $2.8 million in federal funding combined with $630,000 of state funds to replace a drainage system and allow for the safe passage of wildlife, including 9 state-listed rare species, which also supports our biodiversity goals. We have applications out for US DOT Protect Grant funds. These would, again, central to flood protection in places like Route 20 in Worcester, at the exchange of Route 20 and Grafton Street, on Morrissey Boulevard in Dorchester, as well as a statewide planning study to identify more flood-prone transportation infrastructure needs. So those are just some of the areas that come to mind. I mean, there's no shortage of work that we need to do. I can't be here and in the proximity to the Merrimack without mentioning the work that we need to do in the Merrimack in terms of shoring up some of the CSOs and the other infrastructure along the banks. Efforts were made to really clean up that river, and unfortunately with antiquated infrastructure and, you know, the inability of municipalities and towns to really come up with the funds to deal with it. We don't want to go backwards, and I just want to point that out as we are in close proximity
Thank
here.
you. We can see it out the window here. Senator Markey.
Yeah, thank you. You know, and the Markey family is here because of the Merrimack. They left Ireland to come here to work in the mills, and that was the Industrial Revolution, and now you're leading a second industrial revolution here, you know, looking at it from the perspective of reclaiming these old assets and opening up innovation for a way in which young people in our state can lift their gaze to the constellation of possibilities regardless of their race, regardless of their income or country of origin. And that's why I think Senator Warren and I, even though as you completed your opening statement and your answers to Senator Warren's questions, I think we were both giving you a standing ovation in our brains as we listened to that incredible vision that you have for the Commonwealth, what you've done already. So could you perhaps turn to those communities of color, those historically underserved communities, and talk about what your vision is going forward in terms of using all of these federal funds and leveraging it in a way that can ensure that we deal with those still historically undealt with issues, the legacy of the past.
Yeah. I appreciate all your advocacy in this area in particular, Senator Markey. Equity is really at the center of what we do. There's an equity lens on every policy decision made across our administration. And we know that for far too long, certain groups have been shut out of opportunities, including funding opportunities. We have an opportunity now to address that. And it starts with a recognition of the disparities. It starts with an understanding of the history and how we end up with some of these really disproportionate and disparate results. And it starts with an engagement around being very intentional as a team, as an administration, about getting after it. When I mentioned a vehicle, the federal funds partnership for municipalities and tribes. It's an example of an important vehicle to make sure that those communities have access to federal funds. The same is true, I mentioned the $50 million assistance to municipalities in terms of matching grants and a local infrastructure bank that we included in our matching funds legislation. We also included an additional $12 million set aside for technical assistance to under-resourced local governments. The Community Climate Bank, which is really focused on decarbonization of our building sector, is focused on dealing with affordable, low-income housing situations that we know are just really lacking. And so, it's those measures. I think about MVP. This is our Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Fund. We relaunched it 2.0, standing out at Belle Isle Marsh not too long ago. And the idea was to do that new state funding program in a way that focuses on environmental justice communities. I call them environmental injustice communities because these are the ones predominantly low income, predominantly communities of color that have been overburdened and under-resourced for far too long. I think also the fact that we established for the first time an Undersecretary of Environmental Justice speaks to the commitment that we have as an administration on this. Even the housing bond bill that I filed, yesterday or the day before, is very intentional in its focus on addressing issues of environmental injustice as we build housing retrofit going forward. So those are some of the ways. I will always be that civil rights lawyer, though I don't know exactly the state of my bar card these days. But that ethos, that lens stays with me as it did as Attorney General. It certainly does as governor. And we have a team that really does center equity in all that we do.
And I appreciate very much the fact that you see Chelsea every day, you see Lawrence every day. It's part of your makeup, that they are going to be front and center, black, brown, immigrant communities, because ultimately they're our future, they're our workforce, they're our hopes and dreams for the whole 21st century in the state. Very much appreciate.
I appreciate it. And I think we do have an opportunity like never before to actually get after it and address those disparities. And I think it's a huge opportunity.
Thank you. And if I may, Senator, just one more quick question, and that just comes back to your climate bank. It took me many years to get this National Climate Bank up. It's $20 billion. McKinsey says it's going to leverage $200 billion worth of private sector money. It's going to be tens of thousands of potential jobs, even in Massachusetts. There are going to be tens of thousands of projects that get leveraged out of it. And there's a $7 billion Solar for All program on top of that $20 billion that you can apply for. Could you talk about those programs, your bank that you're starting, plus your ability to apply for and qualify for loans that will be coming out, very low interest loans out of the solar bank, out of the climate bank, to leverage, the union jobs on the one hand, and then community development with equity on the other.
Yeah, this is something we're really excited about. The Climate Bank, in particular, it was something we announced early on that we wanted to do, and we wanted to do it in a way that hadn't been done before in the country, and that is to focus it on affordable housing. But what we have known and what I have come to learn from our fantastic climate chief, the country's first climate chief, she sits atop everything, Melissa Hoffer, is what we can do with the leveraging of private investment and how you can take a single dollar and turn it into 10 or 14 or maybe even more. And so the idea is we establish this bank, we seed it. I've already got the $50 million to seed it, all right? And then we look for additional funding, whether through the federal government or through private investment. And that's how we're going to grow this. We have a team set up working already to identify uses and application. It's housed within Mass Housing, which is a quasi-state agency, very conversant in financing and lending arrangements, and will be ready to go. So that's the Climate Bank, very excited about that. And Solar for All, as I say, we have done the work already being able to identify where we can make use of additional capacity in Massachusetts. While we have our 4 seasons, it is still the case that there is sufficient sun for a sufficient number of days, and we've got a lot more opportunity to make use of that. Thinking about how we can do that through these loans, which are, unbelievable in scale, $7 billion we get to compete for. Thinking about now, our teams are how to operationalize. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but we want to be ready to go. And so identifying actual sites, particularly sites that make sense. Not, how do we think about siting solar in a way that's not going to do environmental harm, that's not going to disadvantage communities, but that makes sense strategically. And that's where we are right now, and I'm very excited about the Solar for All program.
Thank you. You are the national leader. Thank you.
Yes, and we both thank you for being here today, but we thank you for the work you've done for 9 months now. And we look forward to the work you do for many, many more months and years into the future. You're a terrific partner, and that's how we get things done.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify. Thank you for the tremendous partner that both of you and your teams have been to the administration and to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We are grateful.
You can count on us. All right. Thank you. And now I'd like to call up our third panel, please. Panel. right. So, whoops, let me wait for Dr. Burke. There we go. So, welcome to our third panel here. I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Lou Antonellis, the Business Manager and Financial Secretary of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Mr. Antonellis was elected as the union president of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers in the Local 103 chapter back in 2014. He has a strong track record of fighting for good, green union jobs across the Commonwealth. Thank you for joining us. Next, we have Dr. Julie Chin, who serves as Chancellor of UMass Lowell. Chancellor Chin was unanimously appointed by the UMass trustees in May 2022, and she became just the second woman to lead a university with more than 18,000 students. Thank you for joining us, Chancellor Chin, and thank you to your entire team at UMass Lowell for welcoming us today. And last, we have Dr. Mary Burke. Dr. Burke has been an educator for over 30 years and is currently the co-executive director of the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents. Dr. Burke was formerly the superintendent of the Chelsea Public Schools, and in 2017, Dr. Burke was named Massachusetts State Superintendent of the Year. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Burke. So I will turn to you now, Mr. Antonellis, for your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Warren. Thank you, Senator Markey. It's great to be back here in Lowell. Last time I was actually in this building was for the ribbon cutting and grand opening back in September of 2014, almost 10 years ago. So the building looks as magnificent today as it did back then. So kudos, Doctor. Local 103 members and contractors have a lot of recent history, of a deep history, but even a more recent history here in Lowell. We performed all the electrical and telecommunications work when this building was built. We also built the University Ave Bridge that you see out the window here, and the Lowell General Hospital's most recent addition and renovation across the river. But I do appreciate the opportunity to be here today to discuss the incredible work IBW members do and the opportunities that new federal infrastructure and clean energy funding has created for our members here in Massachusetts. And I want you to know that I drove up here in my American-made and UAW-assembled all-electric Ford Lightning pickup truck. In fact, Local 103 has an entire fleet of electric vehicles. We're putting our money where our mouth is and showing our commitment to the move to a clean, green electrical infrastructure. We're setting the example for our members, and we're installing 100 EV chargers at our campus headquarters in Dorchester. So I hope to see both of you driving around in government-issued electric SUVs sometime very soon. But I also want to thank our entire delegation for their hard work, bringing billions of dollars in federal infrastructure and clean energy funding into Massachusetts. We're taking advantage of it, and our members are already hard at work, helping businesses, homeowners, school districts, and communities across the Commonwealth use that funding to develop and adapt clean energy technologies of the future. This year, the Boston Public Schools rolled out the first 20 of a fleet of electric buses that will grow to 700 electric buses by 2030. These buses were made possible by $7 million in federal funds and by the hard work of IBW 103 members who work with the school district to design and install the infrastructure they need to electrify their bus fleet. And speaking of buses, the MBTA is also making progress on that front as well. With the help of IBW members and federal infrastructure dollars, we're excited to be building a new bus facility, electric bus facility in Quincy, and by 2026, it'll be ready to host the MBTA's new electric bus fleet. IBW 103 members are also helping residential buildings add electric vehicle charging systems into their parking infrastructure because residents are rapidly switching to electric vehicles. And it's not just electrical vehicle chargers the IBW members are installing. We're also building solar projects across the Commonwealth. And as EPA's Solar for All grants start coming to communities in Massachusetts, thanks in part to your advocacy, we'll be ready to help homeowners take a big step towards zero emissions. And as federal dollars continue to flow in and kickstart more and more projects, IBW is going to be right there. We're doing our part to ensure the electrical workforce we need is ready to hit the ground running. We've seen our membership grow by almost 2,500 additional members in the past several years, and we plan to double that growth over the next 5 years so we can be prepared to meet the Commonwealth's clean energy goals. And we've made substantial and strategic investments in workforce development and training of more than $10 million to create and train the pipeline of workers to meet the demand. And a key piece of our plan to do that is expanding and diversifying the electrical workforce of the IBW. I'm proud to share that in our most recent apprenticeship class, more than 50% of participants are women and people of color. This was our most diverse apprenticeship class ever, and we plan to keep building on that progress. Our membership is committed to reflect the diversity of the communities in which we live and work. This is critical for two reasons. It shows the world that the IBW knows how to meet the moment, and we're doing it through inclusivity. And even more importantly, it shows young women and people of color that a real career in the electrical industry with great pay and benefits is available to them. And thanks to the work of Governor Healey, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, our administration, and our elected officials, we're seeing unprecedented investments, creating new and unique opportunities for IBW members. We're committed to making sure everyone in the Commonwealth, families, businesses, local governments, and workers reap those benefits. So again, I want to thank you both very much for the opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to discussing further how important federal investments in infrastructure and clean energy are good for Massachusetts and good for its union workforce. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Antonellis. Chancellor Chin.
Yes, so Chair Warren, Senator Markey, thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the profound and transformative economic impact of federal investments in Massachusetts. It's an honor to welcome you to Lowell, a city that was founded on innovation and entrepreneurship and transformed by the National Park Service's investment in sharing that history. Federal investments, particularly through the Commonwealth's research universities, have played a pivotal role in spurring innovation and bolstering research and development in the Commonwealth. Here at UMass Lowell, these projects hold the potential to, for example, convert greenhouse gases to clean burning fuels, target RNA molecules to aid in early disease detection, and ensure water quality in underserved communities. These things create jobs, economic growth, and as we see research converted into technology, technology into businesses, and businesses into the cutting-edge industries of tomorrow. For UMass Lowell and countless organizations in Massachusetts and across the country, it is federal funding that creates bold ideas, innovative theories, and then transforms them into tangible technology and societal impact. Federal agencies, as we heard, like the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, the EPA, the Departments of Transportation, Energy, and Defense, these all play a critical role in terms of this federal investment in the Commonwealth. And federal funds from these agencies invest in ideas such as using, as we heard, IRA, right, and Bill, IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, to create community-based energy efficiency programs to combat climate change and save residents of underserved communities needed money on their monthly electric bills. Using CARES Act funds during the pandemic to enhance our medical manufacturing capacity, provide personal protective equipment, and create training opportunities. Using ARPA money via the Mass Tech Collaborative to provide equitable access to high-speed internet and digital literacy to gateway cities and underserved communities in the Merrimack Valley. And using NIH funding to develop point-of-care technologies that target heart, lung, blood, and sleep disorders, especially in underserved populations. These investments bolster economic development, create good-paying jobs and high-tech opportunities for our state's workforce, provide professional and research experiences for our students, and also promote equity outcomes across healthcare, infrastructure, and clean energy production. Today, UMass Lowell is actively working to accelerate this model of success on our East Campus, just around the corner. Through the redevelopment of underutilized land, the university will create a mixed-use district in downtown Lowell with R&D and industry collaboration as its core. This co-location of faculty, researchers, students, industry, government, nonprofits, this has been the key to UMass Lowell's rapidly growing $100 million research enterprise. And from startups to joint research centers with major corporations, our commitment to collaboration has attracted business partners through our shared research facilities, Innovation Hub Business Incubators, and the Massachusetts Medical Device Development, or M2D2 Center, which is run jointly with the UMass Chan Medical School. M2D2 was one of the first 9 Johnson & Johnson Life Sciences Innovation Labs worldwide. And through BARDA, or the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority funding, M2D2 supported more than 80 companies who work to develop life-saving solutions in response to the COVID-19 public health crisis. This recognition by industry, coupled with critical federal investments, have created clusters of expertise around technology, around health sciences, around life sciences and biotech. I was proud to join President Marty Meehan last November in an op-ed in the Boston Globe as part of a statewide push by industry, nonprofits, and state agencies urging the Biden administration to locate the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, or ARPA-H hub, in Massachusetts. And I was thrilled by Governor Healey's announcement last month that the state had succeeded. And while we know that the technical depth and breadth of our universities and industry representatives were no doubt key to this success and administration's choice, as important, I believe, is the history and culture of collaboration between Massachusetts legislators, the organizations here in this Commonwealth, and researchers to translate goals and aspirations into research that help real people. In fact, 5 days before the ARPA-H announcement, we witnessed a similar outcome. The Healey-Driscoll administration announced that Massachusetts would receive nearly $20 million through the Federal CHIPS and Science Act to establish the Northeast Microelectronics Coalition Hub. We're delighted to join with our Massachusetts industry and educational partners to help meet the nation's microelectronics requirements, stimulate job creation, train the next generation of STEM workers, and build the region's advanced manufacturing and technology sectors. UMass Lowell, the Commonwealth, and the country are already beginning to see the tangible outcomes from your efforts, from this historic investment that Congress has made over the last several years. I look forward to your questions today and our ongoing conversations in the month and years ahead as we continue to work with our elected officials and federal agencies to advance knowledge, discovery, and prosperity in Massachusetts and across the United States. Thank you to the committee, the United States Senate, and the entire Massachusetts congressional delegation for your continued support.
Thank you, Chancellor Chen. Dr. Burke.
Yes. First of all, Senator Warren, Senator Markey, thank you for the invitation to speak to you this afternoon. I want to commend you on choosing the term investments in the title and therefore the framing for this hearing. Investment is a term that implies a return or appreciation over time. In education, our investment return is quite simply our students, the next generation, who are prepared with the knowledge and skills to be the future workforce and leaders of our communities, state, and nation. Investing in education is one of the most important ways we can strengthen our economy and ensure our global competitiveness. We are grateful for the federal support to our schools throughout the 2-year pandemic and the multi-year recovery work that continues today. School leaders were able to use the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds authorized in 3 separate federal laws to ensure a holistic, multi-year approach to educating students during and beyond the pandemic. In particular, the $1.8 billion Massachusetts received from the American Rescue Plan ensured district leaders were able to use these funds to address the immediate needs of our students and also plan through an equity lens for post-pandemic transformation of how we do education and how we wrap our school district programs around both students and families. Data collected this summer from AASA of school district leaders in Massachusetts and around the country found that the #1 use of the American Rescue Funds was adding instructional time and programming. This was echoed by data collected by the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which found that addressing unfinished learning loss, supporting special populations such as our ELL and special education students, improving facilities and air quality, and supporting the social, emotional, and mental health needs of our students were the primary areas that were invested. In addition to ESSER funding, there are 2 very concrete areas of recent federal investment that have propelled positive change. I want to highlight the 2 to you today: educational technology and clean energy buses. It is in the area of educational technology that transformational change through an equity lens is most noticeable. Prior to COVID-19, school districts across the Commonwealth were slowly moving forward with their technology plans. In most school districts, students shared classroom sets of computers, laptops, or Chromebooks. In a very few fortunate school districts, students were lucky enough to have a one-to-one capability, but students were not allowed to bring the Chromebooks or the laptops home. Districts did not have the money to institute a repair or replacement plan, as is done with textbooks. The digital inequality, those schools that had computers and those that did not, or only had a few to share among hundreds of students, and those families that had computers or digital resources for learning were there, and those that did not. We knew that this was there, but we were comfortable at the time saying, we're working on it. With COVID-19, the shift to online learning shined the light on educational inequalities that had to be urgently addressed. Through a greater investment in the E-rate program, funded through the Universal Services Fund, ESSER monies, and federal funds mentioned earlier, districts were able to purchase the digital devices, Chromebooks and laptops, as well as hiring technology support staff trained to support the teachers, students, and families in the use of the devices. Second, the funds were used to address the access to internet issues, and so the purchase of hotspots and community family affordability plans were implemented. Third, as teachers changed the way they planned and executed lessons, they created daily lessons that required more connectivity, capacity, and reliability. Federal funds helped with the installation of broadband internet, which provided communities high-speed connectivity that was reliable and stable. Our rural and urban areas in particular benefited from the increased technological access and opportunities to learn, but also highlighted long-standing inequities in who could and could not access the internet. Students from low-income households or those without access to technology and internet connectivity struggled to participate in distant learning, leading to disparities in educational opportunities. As many school district leaders proudly express today, because of COVID-19, our school districts are one-to-one. For other school districts, they are getting there. There is no going back, however, to the way teaching and learning was conducted prior to COVID-19. For us as educational leaders, there is only going forward. I want to thank Senator Markey for his long-standing advocacy for the E-rate program. So what does going forward look like? We build upon the resilient educational infrastructures initiated over the last few years, and we expand where needed. We continue to uncover where there may be digital access and connectivity disparities and seek to close them. We continue to be creative and innovate. It's exciting to envision what the classroom of the future can look like, thanks to the investment in technology. We need to continue to invest in this work. The second area I would like to highlight is the very real investment in our students' health. Federal funds in many school districts were directed to implementing new or upgrading existing HVAC systems, resulting in improved air quality within our schools. To address the air quality outside our school buildings, district leaders used a combination of federal resources to begin to purchase or lease electric buses and charging stations. It is here I want to thank Senator Warren for her work and her vision to provide clean school buses to our communities. Most recently, her work with the Environmental Protection Agency's Clean Bus Program, which has been instrumental in bringing the benefits of electric buses to our communities. The investment in clean buses is a value statement on so many levels. It demonstrates to students that their health is valued. The air quality of their community where they live is valued. We know diesel buses contribute to the air pollution, which in turn contributes to respiratory problems such as asthma in our children. Our urban communities have been the most disproportionately impacted by the air pollution, with emissions from cars, public transit, trains, airports, all converging to create a clean air crisis for our families. Helping these communities in particular sends a message of their value and the environmental justice we seek for them. In addition to making a dent in air pollution, the zero-emission buses are quieter, thus reducing noise pollution. And over time, we believe the buses with charging stations will be more cost-effective and sustainable for our school districts. Our district leaders wanted to share that they are grateful for round one and are eagerly awaiting round two as they seek to replace their diesel buses with environmentally friendly, healthier transportation. One of our district leaders shared that his school district and city did not have the money to take on this initiative. It would not have happened if it were not for these funds and the award. Here again is an example of deep transformational change that has begun and must continue and will continue with your ongoing leadership. We can't go back when so much good has happened.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a terrific statement. Thank you, Dr. Burke. So we've been talking about the importance of infrastructure. It's about traffic, it's about clean air, it's about clean water, it's about building a future, it's about our research, but it's also about jobs. And I want to focus on that for just a minute because we haven't had as much conversation on it. I was looking at the stats on the Boston Logan Airport renovation. The bipartisan infrastructure law set aside $1 billion to improve airports around the country. Logan Airport received the largest grant of any major airport in the entire nation. And it's being used and has been used to fund the work on Terminal E. Mr. Antonellis, you are a labor leader here in Massachusetts. Tell me, who's carrying out the work at Logan to modernize Terminal E?
Sure, the new renovations at Terminal E, Logan, hundreds of millions of dollars in transportation infrastructure investments, and I believe much of it, I think $62 million provided by President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure bill. And union construction firms, including IBEW contractors and members, are still out there working. I know they had a ribbon cutting last week, but
Yeah.
there is still work to do. There was about 1,000 total construction jobs
1,000
created
total
on that one
construction
project,
jobs.
engineering and
Yep.
construction jobs, and about 150 to 200 electrical-specific, electrical telecommunications jobs created for IBEW men and women. In fact, my son is an IBEW apprentice, and he is an employee on that job. So it hits home for me, that job. I'm very excited on the investments at the airport. It's
That is
wonderful.
terrific.
Yeah, yeah.
And not just 1,000 jobs, but 1,000 good union jobs.
That's right.
That's terrific. And
Family-
jobs that are being
Yep.
used for apprentices as well.
That's right.
That is terrific. So when President Biden came to Boston to announce this investment, he said, quote, "Logan is more than an airport, it's an economic engine." Chancellor Chin, I want to ask you, you lead UMass Lowell, so this may seem like an odd question, but is it important to the university here in Lowell that Boston has a world-class airport?
Definitely. And I would say two words, nonstop flights, right? We all know having nonstop flights between Boston and San Francisco and LA and Seattle and of course DC and international, London, Paris, right? Tokyo, Sao Paulo. This enables our faculty, staff, and students to be connected to partners across the world and across the country. And that's what enables us to be at the forefront of new discoveries and also attract companies to want to come here, right? They think about where they're going to locate. Well, if they can take a quick flight from where they are currently to Massachusetts, it makes a huge difference in them thinking about where do I want to locate. And we want them to be here in Massachusetts working with our students, faculty, and staff.
Great. So airport's a great example, but airport's not the only example of jobs that have been funded through these new investments in infrastructure. Mr. Antonellis, can you just name a few other major projects that your members are working on right now that have benefited from federal dollars?
Sure. I know the MBTA gets a lot of bad headlines. but
Yeah,
the M-
deservedly.
Right. But at the end of the day, the MBTA receives a lot of federal dollars.
Yep.
And puts a lot of hardworking Massachusetts residents to work. And we would be lost without those jobs at the MBTA.
Yep.
Maintenance jobs and construction jobs. And I know bus electrification, we've been talking about, 4 major bus electrification projects are coming at the MBTA. One recently bid in Quincy that we talked about, a massive project at the old Lowe's site.
Yep.
And then there's one coming in Cambridge, one in Jamaica Plain, and we're very excited about doing the work, bus electrification
Yeah.
work, as well as in the city of Boston for the school buses to electrify them.
Yeah, and I know, look, I'm aggravated with the T right now, as are a lot of people.
Of course,
But this is how we make it better.
that's right.
And it's not going to get better on its own. It's only going to get better if we make the investment and we have good workers there straightening this out, and I appreciate the work.
We need safe, reliable public transportation. We do,
We need it.
desperately.
That's exactly right, exactly right. Another piece, and you picked up on this, Dr. Burke, that's exciting about the investments in infrastructure is helping electrify the local school bus fleets. And last June, I sent a letter to the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents. You may remember this, highlighting the benefits of electrifying the Commonwealth school bus fleet and encouraging members of your association to take full advantage of the EPA's newly announced $5 billion investment in the Clean School Bus Grants Program. And I just, you got partway there, but I just want to give you a minute to say something more about it. Why do we need to care about green school buses? After all, the kids can get delivered on those old diesel school buses. Why does it matter so much?
Air impacts everything. It seems very evident, but we have to really consider the fact that our students are breathing in toxins from the diesel fuel. And we know some from science in terms of what the impact is on a young person's body, but they end up coming into the classroom and the cognitive brain function might be a little bit slow for a while. Certainly the motivation might be impacted, the energy level that you want from a learner, and so then it's that difficulty to engage in learning, to take academic risks. And so most certainly it's about wanting the best for our students, and it begins with air.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I also want to pick up, you made the point about access to computers and the kids having access. And very important, but I was thinking as well about the gaps in high-speed internet access. You know, the Commonwealth's highest income counties, more than 70% of residents have high-speed internet. But out in Berkshire County, number drops to 39%. Fewer than half of the residents in Franklin County and Hampshire County have access to broadband. And I think that's one of the reasons that another exciting part of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the American Rescue Plan is the massive investment in broadband to get broadband everywhere. $90 billion, the largest federal investment in high-speed internet in our nation's history. So, Dr. Burke, you work with school superintendents across the Commonwealth. Can you just say a little bit more? You talked about the computers themselves, but what it means to have access to broadband?
Sure. I think I'd like to go back to the beginning of COVID and when we first started to have our students learning online. And what ended up happening, the meetings would drop with their teacher. There would be interruptions. There would be the frozen screen, certainly, because there was not enough connectivity. There wasn't the capacity. As teachers got better at planning lessons, they were also including videos, or they were including hyperlinks. And the high-speed capacity of many of our districts were just not able to handle that type of high-speed capacity. And then when you add to 40 teachers doing it all at the same time, then that becomes another piece that you end up losing the connection.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. This is part of the reason that Senator Markey and I were very pleased to help bring $175 million in federal funding to Massachusetts with the goal of bringing online the parts of Massachusetts that don't have access to high-speed internet. Right now, it appears that the funding that we were able to bring in is going to serve about 16,000 locations in our Commonwealth, and this means Massachusetts families, Massachusetts kids who will have access, and it matters. So let me do a personal favorite, and that is federal research. Chancellor Chen, do you know offhand roughly about how much federal research funding UMass Lowell receives right now to support all of your groundbreaking scientific advances?
Yeah, so of our 111 million annual research, about 60%, so of that, about 54%, about 60 million is federal. But the other piece of that is often industry and state, and it's not separate. One of the things that's unique is we talked a lot about matching dollars and commitment. So that federal dollar piece is often matched by the industry piece and the state piece that makes up that whole bucket of 100 million a year.
It's such an important point. It's the leverage point. I was thinking
Yes.
about when we were talking about Logan. It's not that all the dollars came from the federal government, but if the federal government's not there to play, nobody else comes to play.
Right.
And it's having all of it that then creates the jobs, creates enough to support the research, creates enough that we can get the school buses across, whatever it is we need to do. I want to talk about one piece of the funding that expanded as a result of the CHIPS and Science Act. So the CHIPS law allocated $1.6 billion to stand up regional hubs supporting the production of semiconductors and other microtechnologies. And last month, we talked about this some, Massachusetts was awarded $19.7 million in funding to establish one of those regional hubs here. It's going to help Massachusetts lead the way with innovation in this cutting-edge sector, and some of this work is going to take place right here at UMass Lowell. So here's my question for you, Chancellor Chen. How is the microelectronics work being done here at UMass Lowell going to help grow our economy and strengthen our national security?
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you, Senator Warren and Senator Markey, for your support of that effort. I think it speaks to one of the things that we talk about in terms of building ecosystem. There's an opportunity because of the funding bringing together UMass Lowell, other universities, MIT, Northeastern we talked about, right, with companies in the area. It creates this ecosystem that has a virtuous cycle. And one of the things here at Lowell, we have about 80 faculty, graduate students, and undergraduates that are involved in microelectronics research. The key, I think, for Massachusetts is that we don't have a big billion-dollar fab here, right? We don't have a big, but Massachusetts has the skill and the talent to do the value-added piece, right? How do you integrate the chip with sensors? How do you integrate as part of the cloud? How do you do that edge device, edge computing? It's that building on top of the chip that is the specialty, I think, of this Commonwealth. And a lot of that work is being done here in our printed, Raytheon Printed Electronics, in our Center for Advanced Materials and Soft Materials. So a lot of the faculty and students are involved in that microelectronics research.
That's terrific. Senator Markey, do you have some questions?
Wow, yes, thank you. Thanks so much for all that you do, and we can see the future of the Commonwealth sitting right here. So we thank you for everything you're doing to make the 21st century greater than the 20th century or 19th, so we thank you. So, Dr. Burke, just coming back just for a second to the E-rate and the Emergency Connectivity Fund. So, you know, when I was a boy, my father went to Lawrence High School, got a good education. He's a milkman for the Hood Milk Company. We live in Malden, but I can compete with the school superintendent's son in Malden if I take my book bag home and I study as hard as he does. Right? I didn't feel inferior. I felt, as my mother would say, that if you don't study, Eddie, we're going to donate your brain to Harvard Medical School. It's a completely unused human organ. Okay? So it's up to you. Go and do it. So I didn't feel in any way discouraged. But as you're saying, when it comes to these digital technologies, there's a big gap. You know, we don't have to worry really about Lexington or Newton or Brookline, right? But we do have to worry about the kids in Chelsea and Lawrence and Lowell, in other communities who don't necessarily have universal access. So we saw during, as you said, during the pandemic, it just shined a spotlight on that inequality where 12 to 17 million children, mostly black and brown and immigrant, did not have the internet at home. So they were at an incredible disadvantage, which is why, you know, I fought, along with Senator Warren, to add $7 billion extra to the $4 billion in the E-rate program that I created in 1996, so that that $11 billion would help you to create a program for Chromebooks, for hotspots, for Wi-Fi that kids could use. So what's the lesson that we have to take from that in terms of the thirst that kids have for it, regardless of their income, and their aptitude for it, regardless of their race or country of origin, in terms of our long-term workforce development strategies for the Commonwealth, and how ARPA helped you, and how all these other programs have to contribute to further advancing that goal.
Oh, where do I start on this one? You are absolutely correct. You know, first of all, we're in a different world, and we were propelled into this world. The tipping point was COVID-19. And so certainly what we had textbooks for all of us going to school, we now have a Chromebook or a laptop. And what that provides is 24/7 access to knowledge, to education, to problem-solving skills, to connecting to other peers. The future and the landscape of what education can look like. We haven't even talked about you know, AI and virtual reality. Those can be good. They can be positive. What you know, Chancellor Chen was talking about in terms of the developments and the digital piece. What is the future? And if we isolate ourselves to just a few districts that can build that future pipeline of thought partners, of problem solvers, critical thinkers, then we're doing a disservice not only to the districts where our children are not getting that access and opportunities, but we're also doing a disservice to our country, because we need the pipeline across the board. We need a workforce across the board in digital technology and in innovation and creativity.
And how much did that federal funding help?
Oh, immensely. You know, we now have in Chelsea, and I have since retired, but I am working for the Association of School Superintendents, but my successor textbooks are the laptop. The laptop goes home. There is practice, there is tutoring on Saturdays if a child just wants to pick up the laptop and open it up at 9 a.m. There is just the ability for students to be curious and to go look up something. We all, many of us had, a set of encyclopedias in our home growing up. Well, the laptops, the digital access is the encyclopedia nowadays.
Right, and with AI added on top of it, and we have to be smart about how we do it.
No, we
Maybe-
have to wrestle with security
Yeah.
and safety on behalf of our children, but absolutely, we should not fear it.
Yeah, and with maybe 60 languages spoken here in the schools of Lowell, with AI, every one of them might have an individualized with their home language, ability to be able to give them, that kind of individualized,
Yep. The
attention
tutoring,
that they need.
yes.
And then it comes to you, Mr. Antonelli, you're talking about your son now,
That's right.
following in your footsteps. And there's going to be all of these thousands and thousands of jobs now that require a higher skill set, I think, than you had to have.
That's right.
So what are those additional skills that your son now has that you didn't have when you started in terms of all of these digital technologies? And
Yes.
the role that this whole system plays
So, yeah, it's not just my son, my daughter, too.
in? And your daughter?
Went and got a college education. She got a business degree at UNH, and now she's an electrical apprentice. She's doing estimating, and she's working with no longer blueprints, but it's on a computer now. And she takes the computer home, and she learns how to estimate a job and count light fixtures and plugs along the floor with a computer and with software that helps her lay out a job and bid a job for her contractor. And the technology is amazing. The electrical industry is changing so fast when it comes to building automation. And you can come in with a laptop and you can make the lights come on when someone enters the building and shut off as soon as they leave. And programming for security systems, for card access, for cameras, stuff that didn't exist 20, 30 years ago, but now is prevalent in every single building that we enter. And it's all, that technology exists here.
And these kids have to
gonna
have the
continue.
digital skill set
They
in order
absolutely
to
do.
get into
They
the
absolutely
game.
do. That's right.
And again, you were mentioning in terms of minority apprentices, could you
Sure.
go back with that number one more time?
Absolutely. So we started 7 years ago by administration, and we made a deep dive into being purposeful on creating more opportunities for women and people of color. And certainly, because we're a Boston-based local union, the folks of Boston from the housing projects and the communities and the neighborhoods in Boston that typically wouldn't have access. So we've increased our minority participation and women participation every single year. And for the past 3 years straight, we've had 50% plus of women and people of color in our apprenticeship program. And kind of to give you a little snapshot, over the past several years, we've been retiring members, right, with a racial makeup of like 95, 96% white males that are leaving the industry. And that's just a snapshot of where the industry was 35 and 40 years ago. But the folks that are coming in and replacing those workers are 50% women and people of color that are creating those jobs. And that's where we're gonna look to fill the gaps and fill the needs for the jobs of the future, all these green jobs that are coming.
Yep.
We're gonna need everybody, all hands on deck to help us. Women and people of color and underprivileged communities are helping us meet those goals and
And
needs.
you're essentially tied to Dr. Burke over here in terms of the
Absolutely.
provision of that skill set for the new workforce.
Yeah.
As older, white,
Yep.
male workers are retiring. And then just finally, if I may, Chancellor Chen, can you talk about the importance of environmental justice funding in
Yeah.
research? So that we can have the big picture seen quite clearly in terms of what has to happen.
Yeah, and it is critical, environmental justice funding. On many ways, I'll give two quick examples. One is a project I think that you are very familiar with. NSF funded a project to develop the electronic tongue as a way to detect contamination in water. And the key part of that is that it is a handheld, easy-to-use electrochemical device that anybody can do. And so if we put these in the hands of what I'd like to call a citizen scientist, right? A high school kid, an elderly person, somebody in their household that tests their drinking water, it enables us to get a snapshot across the whole community to understand if there's contamination. And that's critical. I think the governor mentioned before about sewer overflows. And
Yeah.
these types of things with contaminated water hit environmental justice communities harder than others. And if we put in the hands of these people the ability to test their own water and for us to identify where there's problems quickly, that's something that helps all communities. And then the other piece I'll mention is energy efficiency, right? Understanding how, similar thing, environmental justice communities often don't take the most advantage of some of the programs we have for energy savings. And so this project is a way to understand and talk to those communities and get them involved and understand how do you find that early adopter in an EJ community and get them to trust that this is something that is beneficial to them. Those are just two great programs that have been sponsored by federal funding, by your support, to help make this happen for all of our communities.
Yeah, and everyone talks about our need for more megawatts of electricity.
Yeah.
But they don't talk enough about megawatts because of energy efficiency.
Right.
Because we're working smarter, not harder, using these digital skill sets to just reduce the amount of electricity we use in the first place, and giving these young people the skill sets they can use in buildings, in cars, and all their projects, just to make all of these projects more efficient. So we thank all of you for your work, and I just like to note that, you know, there's an empty space here for Congresswoman Trahan, and I think
Yes.
she'd rather be here than.
I think she would rather be here than in DC holding the fort down.
That's a low bar.
Thank you, Congressman.
That's
Thank you,
right.
Senator.
That's all right. So you ready for me to wrap this up?
Ready.
We're good? So I just want to say thank you again. We've talked today, long day, about infrastructure, about what it means for jobs and the economy and our communities and resilience. But this has also been a day about partnership. I have the best partner in the United States Senate. We are more than twice as strong. Do the Power Rangers thing, wear our wings, right? We also have a great partner in our governor and lieutenant governor who are all hands on deck and ready to go, and in our mayors who want to be part of this. But it's also about partnership with the people who've shown up as our witnesses. I am very grateful to you for being here, for talking about these issues that are so important to all of us. We have a real opportunity here. And let me put it this way, we will do so much better if we keep strengthening these partnerships as we go forward. So thank you again to UMass Lowell for hosting us. It's been terrific, and thank you to our witnesses. Questions for the record are due 1 week from today on Friday, October 27th. For our witnesses, you have 45 days to respond to any questions. Thank you again. With that, this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.